Hello, welcome back everyone with another episode on reigniting the fragments of the fourth way. And we are continuing from the previous three episodes when we embarked on the study of the types, human types, Enneagram types. And today we are going to discuss the next two types, Martial and the Jovial type. And below here there's a playlist that takes you there, and part 34 will be when we start talking about types in general, and then we go through two types in each episode. So Marshall, and welcome Peter, thank you for joining me. The Martial type, it's interesting. In mythology, it's the god of war, the warrior god Mars, and the predominant gland is the adrenal, which is responsible for the fight and flight, and for dealing with intense emotions, survival, action, stress, the stress hormone. They tend to, the Martial type, they tend to be more like a medium-sized type. It's a stocky, powerful, tend to be more athletic, could be athletic on the more sturdy warrior side, like a Viking in some way, or could be still sturdy and athletic, warrior-like, but a little bit on the skinnier side. This is the classic, the idea of a classic warrior. They tend to, not all the time, but they tend to have freckles and to have more of a more fair complexion and to have blonde or red hair. They are, due to the adrenal being the predominant gland, so there is a certain kind of fieriness to their behavior or to their thought processing or dealing with reactions, dealing with various life situations. Could be impulsive, straightforward, direct, maybe not, there's the saying like a bully in a china shop that could describe sometimes the, let's say, lack of softness or lack of diplomacy skill of a more pure Martial type. Head-on, confronting, and something is happening, then trying to act. They are going to action to solve it or to fight it or to run away from it. So there is action first. It's because due to this secretion of adrenal, very hardworking, could have discipline. They get many things done. Resilient, a lot of endurance, dependability, reliable, loyal, committed to something, as I said, working hard. Justice, for them, there is this idea of justice and what's right and what's wrong and the rules, and that's how it should be, and it shouldn't be like that. This is not fair, this is not right. They may often have triggers around this. It's not right, it's not fair, it shouldn't be like that. Injustice, righteousness, indignation. I'll pause here, Peter, and if you have something.
It's the only other type on the Enneagram besides the Mercurial, which is active, negatively charged, and of a masculine nature. And this idea of justice and fairness, and the martial is very resistant to when things are not fair. It can become kind of adamant. And so this is why it can be sort of straight-laced and rule-based, and as Mihai has said, and I'm saying also, justice-based. The classic policeman is the marshal who's making sure everybody's following the rules. And if they don't follow the rules, they're going to be punished appropriately. All of this seems quite rational to this type. And the type, broad shoulders, as you can see in this very simple diagram, broad-shouldered, narrow-hipped, muscular, athletic, very masculine in appearance. Both male and female will look like this, will have broad shoulders and narrow hips. The Venusian female, will have the curvaceous hips, broad hips perhaps even broader than shoulders. It's almost the inverse of this shape here you see. And the planet Mars, one of the smaller planets, smaller than the Earth, red, ruddy, no atmosphere to speak of. This, interestingly enough, parallels the behavior of the type, which is very direct. The martial does not hide anything, not like the Venusian with the thick atmosphere. What you see is what you get with a martial. They speak their mind, they're direct. They can have a ruddy complexion. And as Mihai said, red hair, at least in the West, this type can be red-haired. In other parts of the world, they can be dark-haired. But, Van Gogh is a classic example of a martial. Van Gogh, the artist, with his sort of crazed look and freckly face and red hair and unkept kind of direct manner. Now, he was an extreme character, yes, but sort of gives you an idea. Robert Redford, the actor, he has an appearance, not like Van Gogh, but sort of reddish brown hair, sort of a rugged look, very direct. Robert Redford is very outspoken about his causes and his beliefs and his principles. He doesn't hesitate to speak his mind about them. And this adrenaline thing, this fact that the adrenals govern this type. Now, you look at this physical body of this martial. This martial is ready to fight. If need be, is built almost perfectly for battle, for confrontation. Almost the perfect instrument for these adrenal glands to fight. And if necessary, to flight, to fly away, to run away, to get away quickly and efficiently. And this adrenal influence in this type is what lends itself to, or what prompts this type to be so impulsive. The martial type is very impulsive, quick to act, and doesn't mind a confrontation right away. And all of this too can result in a certain destructiveness. So this martial type has characteristically a chief feature of power. But as we've seen with some of the other types, power has variations, just as vanity has variations. And the form of power in the martial type is more in the direction of being destructive. They will say things. They can be very cruel and blunt and direct, lacking discretion and lacking diplomacy. And they can be destructive in this way. It's almost like they're throwing a weapon at someone when they say things to them. The Mercury, has power too, but it's a different kind of power. It's a kind of a forcefulness and almost a roundabout form of power, like a devious type of power. The martial, straight through, boom. It's why these two types historically don't really get along. They're not compatible, at least not for very long. Both active, both negatively charged, both masculine, both with power. One with a destructive directness and another with a manipulative indirectness that can be hard to predict and tricky. Martials don't like that.
Mm-hmm. And the Mercurial doesn't feels threatened or attacked, and this directness, this confrontation, they can't get away with their sneaky indirect, roundabout way.
Marshals will often have sort of short, stubby fingers. Saturns will have these long, elegant fingers. Again, corresponding to the physical attributes of the body, the hands are reflective often of a lot. Sometimes there have been people who've studied just the hands and can determine quite a lot about people just from their hands. And so you'll notice with the marshal, they might have shorter fingers, thicker fingers, not necessarily elegant, and for lack of a better word, elegant hands. They don't mind getting their hands dirty either. They like tools. They like work. Marshal type likes physical work, likes to, as the expression goes, to get in there and get their hands dirty, whether it be with something physical or something intellectual or something emotional. They're driven, impulsive, active, hard-nosed, tough. Marshal is the one in your group of friends, if danger's headed your way, you feel under threat, you want your marshal friend with you to defend you. Marshals like defending their friends and defending causes and defending right and such.
Yeah, it's interesting. In childhood, I had my best friend was, looking back, was kind of South of Mars, with a lot of Mars. And sometimes we'll go about high school, and sometimes they were bullies or other people. There were all kind of situations, and I will be very cautious and trying to avoid and like this. And he will, at some point, he will snap. He will just snap. He will see red, and he will fight. And then I will try to pull him out. I was like, come on, let's go. And then I would talk to him, and he told me that at some point, he doesn't hear anymore, something clicks, and he would fight because it was unjust what was happening. It is interesting. And we were talking about some other examples, like this MMA fighter, McGregor, right? McGregor is a good example.
Ian McGregor, is that his name? I'm not sure. Ewan McGregor, yes. The mixed martial arts champion,
Yeah.
who's had quite a controversial public life because he's destructive. Yes, and he's certainly destructive in the fighting ring. And he has that broad-shouldered, narrowed-hip, muscular, active, warlike, warrior-like physique, and the face, and ready to go into battle. And this type, of course, is, since we've already talked about the Venusian type in an earlier video, this is the maximum attraction of the Venusian. They're drawn to one another. One's active, one's passive, one's positive, one's negative, one's masculine, one's feminine. This is the classic sort of love story, the martial and the Venusian, the fiery martial and the passionate, sensual Venusian. And they are drawn to one another because they are opposites. And it's not uncommon to see a martial with a mate who is Venusian. Who was the famous actor, the classic couple, Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor, have often been given as examples of these two types. He was fiery and direct, was very debonair and suave, and she was this sensual, curvaceous, beautiful female, and they had an on and off relationship because, and this is not uncommon with martials and Venusians, because they're so opposite, and it's so attractive what is opposite, and yet it doesn't mean there will necessarily be long-term compatibility. And it's not uncommon to see a martial Venusian relationship that goes through a lot of ups and downs because they're so opposite, and yet inevitably are drawn back to one another. Makes for an interesting romantic dynamic.
I guess other examples would be And it's interesting you mentioned Van Gogh because there was a recent movie with Daniel Defoe, who, in my opinion, has some martial, who played Van Gogh.
Oh, you mean Willem Dafoe?
William, yeah, right.
Willem Dafoe, yes, that's right.
William Defoe. And then other example would be this current James Bond, unless they changed. Daniel Craig,
Daniel Craig, yes.
good example of martial. I would say
Short to medium stature, broad-shouldered, narrowed hip, muscular. Yeah, he's a good example.
I would say Russell Crowe more like 20 years ago, because Russell Crowe seems like a good example of Mars, Jovial, Mars.
Which we'll be talking about next. Yes, that's the next movement on the Enneagram. And as you can see here, Mars moves toward Jupiter, toward Jovial. And yeah, Russell Crowe, he's right in there in the middle.
Especially, you know, like when he did a Gladiator or this kind of, I would say the way he looks and the way he feels, Mel Gibson, Mel Gibson, they say Mel Gibson or the role of Braveheart. That is a classic martial type and look. In terms of females, Julianne Moore, yes.
Julianne Moore.
That will be a good example. Well, another interesting quality or feature of the martial is that there's a fiery sexuality. There's a lot of energy around that, and passion and fiery, and sometimes may end up in trouble because it's, as I say, out of control or out of explosive, act now, think later, can be also hypersexual activity. And now we are going to talk later about mixed type, but we already started to talk about it. So you can see, like we talked last time about the Saturn, the tall, lanky leader, controlled, the bigger picture, the teacher, the father. So you see it can go towards Saturn Mars. Saturn Mars will be the tall, powerful leader warrior. Yeah, will be a tall, powerful Viking. Saturn Mars, Arnold Schwarzenegger, John Wayne. There was the example of a Saturn Mars type. You see where's the Saturn, but now there's an enhanced kind of warrior, fire, justice, the law, the sheriff. A lot of marshals or Saturn Mars or Mars Jovial you may see in law enforcement, military, high density of that. And it's interesting to, you know, not to get biased. Oh, I like this actor, is cool, this type is nice. But it's more like you can have a marshal or Saturn Mars, you can have a wise man, or you can have a criminal. You can have somebody who is a wonderful artist, or somebody who destroyed nations. It's the same type, you know, so it's good to be open. Like the American current president, say Saturn Mars. So the same type can be
the upcoming current president, yes, Donald Trump.
I mean the current
Saturn Mars, yes. As of the time we're making this video, yes.
Right.
He's been elected, but yes. Yes, Saturn Mars.
So okay, so it can be Saturn Mars or more pure Mars like McGregor, or can go Mars Jovial. And maybe we should soon go into Jovial.
I'll go to Jovial first, but we can see that the Mars Jovial now has gone from being this, generally speaking, broad-shouldered, narrow-hipped, bandy legs. By the way, we didn't mention that marshals often, not often, but if you see someone who's bow-legged or has bandy legs, it's often indicative of the martial type. It's rare for the other types to have that. There's something there. And now see you still have the broad shoulder, but there's a paunch developing. You see the slight bow-leggedness. but it's tending more now toward a passive. And then the jovial, this is showing a female figure, but the jovial type is now getting bigger in the hips, a little less wide in the shoulders, almost kind of like the Venusian, but a more sort of massive, strong body. Jovials often have a sturdy, strong body, but they're thicker, bigger, rounder, certainly than the Saturns, the Mercuries, and the Marshalls.
Yeah, let's go towards the jovial, if you wish to
Yeah, and this is no accident either, because the planet Jupiter is the next to the largest planet in the solar system. Actually, it's bigger than Saturn, but if you take into account Saturn's rings and the dimension of space it occupies with its rings, it's bigger. But jovial is this large, multicolored, very active, gaseous. It's enormous compared to the Earth. And the jovial type can be physically one of the largest types, not the tallest. The Saturns usually are the tallest types, but in terms of body mass and kind of fortitude and demeanor, the jovial is it's a motherly, paternal type. It's a passive type, and it's a feminine, what we call feminine type, and it's positively charged. Quite contrary to the Marshall. And jovials are warm, they're friendly, they're also entertaining, they are flamboyant, they love to dress up and dress in many colors and textures. You'll see jovial women with a skirt and a shawl and a hat and jewelry and this kind of thing. They love to kind of dress big, you could say. And often they dress like this to cover their figure, because they don't have what would ideally be considered the ideal figure of beauty in today's age. Although that's already changing. We can see that's already changing now. That a more, how shall we say, a more full-bodied female figure is coming into vogue more and more. Advertising's pushing this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's even fashion. It's being forced upon humanity, at least in the West, this idea that, hey, guess what? It's not just the little skinny, tall females who are ideal beauty. There's the rest of us are also beautiful in our own way. And so this is now, you see this more and more. But the jovial men and women, broad, big, love to talk, love to give a speech. They're very creative. You look out there at Jupiter. It's so colorful. It's as though Jupiter contains something that all the other types contain. Jovials are creative. They often can be musical, good writers, actors, musicians, linguists, wonderful teachers. They're wonderful parents. They're all embracing, very accommodating, very forgiving. All of this passive, and they're governed by the posterior pituitary gland, which, remember, is on the other side of the same gland as the Saturn. So the Saturn is the most paternal type, and this is the most maternal type, this jovial. They have round faces, usually kind of, sometimes they have a little nose, a small nose, like a Santa Claus nose, we used to say. They're starting to lose their hair. They usually have a little bit of a paunch, and it can become more than just a paunch. It can become a large projected belly. And you'll see the Mars jovial is the classic Mars jovial, has short legs, bandied legs like a Marshall, and then this torso, a sort of elongated torso with a big belly, sort of carried right in front. But they're very nimble, graceful, entertaining people, the jovial.
Yeah, both Marshall and jovial, more like thicker bones, heavier bones, not thin and slender necessarily. And the jovial like that is a big important for them harmony. Just like almost Jupiter, apparently it is said that it almost emanates some kind of music or something. Also, the jovial type, it likes harmony, beauty, art, as you said, but likes interpersonal harmony. They are a good diplomat, good statesman, can be very helpful and not go into a destructive kind of mode, warfare.
Gorbachev,
Yeah.
Churchill. I was trying to think of some American president.
Franklin?
Benjamin Franklin, yes, all jovial, a lot of mass, deep thinkers, and as you're saying, Mihai, about harmony, trying to strive for unity and harmony in their countries and cultures and between countries and cultures, diplomatically minded, able to navigate, see both sides. Come on, let's get together. Let's do it together. Let's not fight. Let's not harm one another. It's a very nurturing mentality, psychology, and energy.
Santa Claus.
Santa Claus, yes.
Archetypal, jovial, and the old school female innkeeper, the mother of all, holding of the pub and bringing a lot of beer and joking with the people with big breasts. However, she's in charge and she knows everybody and jokes with everybody and she puts everybody in place when necessary.
And jovials often have many friends, and the planet has many moons circling around it that are dependent, and people become emotionally dependent, oftentimes, if not financially independent. I mean, dependent on jovials. So they have a circle of friends they like to hold forth, and they hold sway over a group of people. This is why they like to entertain. Jovials don't spend a lot of time just by themselves, holed up in their house. They are like a social axle in the culture, in the society, and they nurture people, and they nurture their group of friends. They nurture their community, and in some instances, they nurture their country, as we were mentioning about some of these politicians in history.
Yeah, interesting. Gurdjieff would be a good example of Mars jovial. And if you see photos of him when he was young, or the movie, Meetings with Remarkable Men, you will see this type of more martial. But as he got older, he was going towards jovial. Also, they love food. They love pleasure and enjoyment and gregarious and jokesters and to feed, to take care, to cook. Of course,
Falstaff, Shakespeare's Falstaff.
Mhm.
So jovial, yes. Also, because they're so multifaceted, perhaps more so than any other type, multifaceted, multi-talented, and this lends itself to vanity. The jovial can be quite vain, and they're not necessarily physically the most attractive always, but they are so multifaceted and so entertaining and interesting and have such depth. And all of this will make them think how wonderful they are, and they'll develop this vanity, and they want to do good for others. They want to be kind and generous and giving, but they want recognition for it. And they're quick to be hurt emotionally if they don't get the recognition. They think they are just do-gooders, but in fact, they want to do good and then be told how good they are and how wonderful they are and how appreciated they are. Jovials are appreciators of life in general, but they also want reciprocation. They want to be appreciated for being so appreciative. And so this kind of vanity is different than, say, the mercurial vanity that wants to be on stage, is looking not so much for appreciation as affirmation. Jovials don't really need affirmation, but they do need and want appreciation and recognition of their value, of their depth, of their talents, and so on. So it's a different variation of vanity. And also because they are so creative, they can have so much creative energy in so many different areas, they can also run out of it and kind of lapse out of it. And they're known to suffer from something called periodicity, meaning for a while they'll have a spurt of creativity and energy and ideas and plans, and they'll be, writing a play and composing a song and learning a new dance. And then they'll collapse and they'll get bored. I don't want to do that. I don't like that anymore. That's not so interesting. And they'll go on to some other interests because they like having interests, new interests and expanded interests. And so they will be periodistic. And you may have friends like this who are jovial, the Jupiter type, and you'll wonder they're so creative one week and so uninterested in that wonderful project this week. They're on to something else because they like that kind of stimulation too from new things.
I was thinking of Marlon Brando as, and it's interesting. There's this phenomena with it's not very clear in the teaching, this idea, but I notice it experientially. Let's say somebody is Mars jovial, but in the early years, the 20s, 30s, they look like Marshall. But then as they get older, they are moving a little bit towards the other side that was in them anyway. So you can see Marlon Brando, earlier years, very athletic, martial, and then later became like the jovial.
You see this with Russell Crowe.
Yeah.
Yes, it's very interesting. Also, we haven't talked about it a lot, but everyone develops an imaginary picture of themselves. In essence, we are these types. Mm-hmm. And all the physical attributes and psychological proclivities we've been talking about that are characteristic of each type. We're talking about the essence, how we are born and how we are kind of naturally are. But what happens is we start to develop an imaginary picture of ourselves. And so someone may be Mars jovial. This may be their essence type like this, but they think of themselves like this. And so they lose weight. They lift weights. They exercise. They go into a physical regimen. They fashion themselves to be a little more martial than they really are when in fact they're a Mars jovial, let's say. And it's also not uncommon to see a Venusian who fancies himself a martial. Mm-hmm. It's ironic. They're attracted to the martial. They want to be a martial, the Venusian. And you'll see this sometimes with policemen who are actually Venusians. And they're trying to act like they're martial types. And they're not. And it's almost comical, at least at a distance, as long as you're not in trouble with the law. But you will see, it's not uncommon to see policemen who are Venusians who really want to be marshals. They fancy themselves marshals, and they're not. And you can see this with the other types too. They will kind of try to acclimate or imitate the characteristics of their maximum attraction. So what we're talking about, though, just to be clear, is the essence type. And this is why you might see someone who really this is their type, but in their youth, they are doing this. They're keeping that pot belly in check and keeping those muscles going. And then as they get a little older, start relaxing, stop exercising as much, their true body type starts to reveal itself. And or, as Mihai is suggesting, there may be a gradual movement of the type, may start to slowly take on particularly physical attributes common to the next type on the Enneagram. Although that's not a sign of conscious evolution. That's a natural movement.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting from the point of view of, because we are presenting this knowledge, but it's not, I'm presenting the knowledge in particular people who are interested in applying the fourth way system or non-duality system for awakening. So it's not just as a theory that is interesting at the same level with the zodiac and with the, other typology. And I'm in the groups that I'm facilitating, like people are interested and they are checking, and I can see there is this difficulty because this is the essence type, but one, due to conditioning or due to being raised in a different culture or due to being raised in harsh conditions, they needed to adapt and became somehow different than they are. And so they developed a personality which is very different than their essence. Like I have a friend, he's very Venus Mercury, but then he's very martial, it's very martial approach on life that is genuine and also connected. He was in Germany, he was educated in Germany, and then he had a hard life. So then, so that one when you try to figure out the type in oneself or others, it has to be, you can't rush into it. You need to take into account the physical characteristics, how the person looked when they were younger, how they look now, their psychology. But initially, when we start the work, we have a lot of false stuff. We are not in our essence. So then may be misleading. Yeah, but as we do more work on ourselves along a skillful manner, our personality diminish and we become more ourselves in terms of our essence, and then it will be easier to see that type. Also, I experienced it myself. When I was younger, I had a certain type, but I wanted to be like another type. And I felt like that is the ideal hero, the ideal warrior, the ideal. So I wanted to be Saturn Mars. I wanted to be like Arnold Schwarzenegger. So I was wiry and skinny, but so I tried work hard. I worked a lot of hard bodybuilding and many push-ups for many years to try to be another type. And it didn't work. I mean, I got a little more athletic and a little more muscle, but at some point I was like, man, I don't need to, it's okay. It's okay how this is, it's fine, So we can try to imitate. Our personality would reject our own type and imitate somebody else's type. So when we try to identify our type or others, we need to go through many layers of illusion, of falseness, of complexity.
And one of the rewards of going through all of that is then we will cease to struggle to maintain this illusion of needing to be a certain way or look a certain way or act a certain way or impress people a certain way. And we'll be able to just settle into being the type that we are, with our strengths and our weaknesses, our assets and our limitations, and not fret so much and not fight, and mostly not struggle with ourselves internally, which has a lot to do with maintaining this feeling of I as this unique person. It's strange, but when we begin to really look at ourselves in this way, we are doing so from inside this imaginary picture we have of ourselves. And it's hard to ferret out everything and sort everything and see it as it really is. And it takes time to gradually learn to see ourselves more from the outside, the way others see us. But the reward, as I say, comes in, it's not the right word, but I think you understand what I mean. The benefit, the result, the positive result is less struggle, less unnecessary suffering, as the fourth way says, in relation to who we are versus who we imagine ourselves to be.
We forgot to mention some female examples of Jovial, did we?
No, I don't recall that we did. We had mentioned this earlier when you and I were talking, Mihai, that came to mind is Meryl Streep. To me, Meryl Streep is a Mars Jovial type. She's played many times. She's played a Saturn in her roles, but she herself is not the classic Saturn. Physically, you can see that her physiology is more Mars and Jovial. We did mention Julianne Moore
for Marshall. And I guess
Robert Redford and Van Gogh for Marshall. But what's his name? Gleason.
Yeah.
The actor. I forget his first name. right now, the Irish actor. He's more Mars jovial.
Yeah, Brendan Gleeson.
Brendan Gleeson, thank you.
The
Mhm. Yeah.
Irish actor. You said, yeah, it's a good example of Mars Jovial.
And the Irish culture, by the way, is you could say it's kind of a martial culture. And there's no accident. They're always at war. The martial type is a warlike, confrontational type. And the Irish Republic in the north and the south, and it's gone on and on for decades. And they're always at odds with each other and fighting. They can't get away from it, can't escape this. They like it even. Whereas Germany is also a martial country, but tending more toward Mars jovial mentality. And
And the former chancellor, it's a good example. I forgot her first name.
Merkel.
Merkel.
Yes.
Merkel. She would be a good example of jovial or
Harmonizer. Yes, big. She played an important role in the establishment of the European Union, bringing countries together and being on good diplomatic terms with other countries who were at odds with the European Union.
And the same with the role of Gorbachev and collaborating with, I forgot the name of the president. I believe he was a Saturn Mars. Reagan. It's a nice
Yes, Ronald.
Saturn Mars jovial.
Saturn Mars, I think, yeah.
With Gorbachev, and for the benefit of all, harmonizing. Let's make it better. Let's cool off. That it's changed. Changed things. The maximum attraction of jovial is Mercury. So you may be surprised sometimes you see like a large, let's say a more large, bigger frame woman with a wiry, kind of mousy, quick, elegant, very polished, skinnier man. And you are wondering, whoa, what's going on? But that is the right combination. And of course, you can have the opposite.
Yes, this becomes just looking at this particular diagram now and just seeing how these laws at work, these forces at work, this idea of human beings are influenced by these planets, and the form we take as a body and the form we take as a mind, according to the fourth way theory here, results from the influence of these particular planets. This is very interesting. And then it's all in harmony, positive, passive, negative, masculine, feminine, etc., all in harmony and in balance and working as one unit. But we take it personally. We think we're a certain way. We think we're unique, or we want to be like somebody else. We don't see that it's all part of this one device, like a clock. It's all working together, all these many pieces. And we here on Earth sort of take it for granted that we are what we are, and we don't understand the extent to which we're the result of these influences and the extent to which we're governed by them. They drive not only our physical shape and our metabolism, they drive our thought processes and the manner in which we react to things that happen in the world around us. And given all of these together, we form a sense of identity. But when we start to look at this sense of I, this feeling of I as a person, when we can parse out this body type information and begin to see this is not consciousness, this is, as I have often said, this is a detailed study of who you are not as consciousness, as awareness. This is the detailed study of what you are not. And yet it helps to understand why we feel the way we do about ourselves. And also to understand it's fine as who we are and what we are as we are is perfectly fine. None of these types, Mihai said it before, none is better. None has an advantage over the others. None is better positioned in terms of evolution, awakening, enlightenment. This is all what the fourth way calls mechanical. This is what has happened as a result of the confluence of all these influences of planets, and then the glands being the receptors for those influences. It's quite an amazing theory when you think about it, that these big bodies out there in the solar system are transmitting these energies, and we have in us these glands, and they're like radio receptors. They're receiving these influences in some mysterious way that science can't measure. And the outcome is these bodies that look a certain way and these psychologies that operate a certain way. And when you learn about these types too, and you start to look at the world this way, you will see that you don't ever see anyone who's outside of this scope of this, what we're describing. Even when you talk about the blending of types, and you don't ever see a Jupiter Mercury. No, there's that flow we were showing on the movement along the Enneagram here. It moves from one type to the next type, and you can be a combination, but it's always in the neighborhood of the same type. And the exception to this is, and we'll talk about it next time, is the solar type. You see the sun is in the middle there. The solar type can blend with any of the other types, and it can blend with any of the other combinations of types. So you could be a Mars Jovial solar, or you could be a Venus Mercury solar. But we'll talk about that next time.
Yeah, so I want to say this, that piggybacking on Peter's metaphor, it's like this type, it's almost like type of cars or types of spaceships, but type of cars. There's a Beamer, there's Mercedes, there's Renault, there's a Chevy, which is the type of car, which is the body mind. Yeah, but the passenger, the owner, and the driver is the soul, which is consciousness. Yeah, so these are just types of the vehicle. And yes, ultimately the vehicle itself is made of consciousness, for everything is consciousness. But when we use words like that, when we talk about this is what we are not, is that these mental tendencies and physical characteristics are coming and going, and they are not our essential identity. They are not what remains, what is unchanging. Yeah, so that's when we talk about that's what we are not. We refer to the body type, ego, and what we are as the fundamental essential identity, Buddha nature, that which is aware through the type. And another idea was that they have been wonderful, uplifting influences on humanity from all the type. They have been teachers of truth from all types, saints from all types. They have been villains and murderers and gangsters and rapists and really bad, destructive people from all types. Yeah, so we just want to really make this clear. And it's that type, that vehicle, but depends the level of awareness, the level of development of the consciousness, then it changes a lot. So I think we can stop here. And for next time, we finished 6 main types, and we have just one more. We have the Saturn, we have the solar type. And then we are going to go once again more precisely about the mixed types with examples and this or that. So stay tuned for that, and feel free to send your questions. Some of you did send questions to me personally or to Peter. If you don't have our contacts, you can put it here as a comment. We are happy to answer any questions about this as we are winding down. We are towards the end of the presentation now. All right, thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Mihai.